This episode of Pitch List is brought to you by Screened Threads. Screened Threads is a family-owned business specializing in Nashville curated gifts. Check them out online at screenedthreads.com or visit them in person at Marathon Village. Hey everybody, Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List. Join us on a deep dive into the heart of what makes writing songs and making music so magical. Let's find out what makes songwriters tick, and along the way, remember why we love music. Welcome to Pitch List. Hey everyone, Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List, the Songwriters Podcast. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. And for more exclusive content and performances, don't forget to follow us on social media at Pitch List Podcast, or visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com. And now, here's the show.
Hey everyone, I'm Dana, the producer of Pitch List, and this week, Chris sat down in the studio with Grammy Award-winning, absolute legend Jim Ed Norman. From his start in the 70s as a composer, arranger, conductor, and player on the Eagles' iconic Desperado and Hotel California records, to his work as an A&R man and label head at Warner Nashville and Curb Records, Jim Ed's career is one of the most eclectic we've seen. He was one of the first Nashville execs to work towards signing more black artists in the 80s and was also a pioneer of expanding the Americana movement in the 90s. To have a career that stretches like this over numerous decades is not an easy feat to achieve, and Jim Ed remains active in the music world today, earning his first Grammy just last year. He's also currently reunited with the Eagles to lead their 70-piece orchestra on the Hotel California Arena Tour. So settle in for some great stories and industry wisdom in this interview. And without further ado, here's Jim Ed Norman.
So I want to talk about, the last 2 days I've been going over your career. Okay. And anyone listen, you guys will Google this. You'll know that. I first encountered you, I moved to Nashville in 1994. I think you were running Warner Brothers Records. So you were like the big guy in town. Well, we were the brand new writers. We did not have access to royalty on your scale. You were the guy we all wanted to give our songs to, or because you were also producing.
Yes.
And that's my first encounter with your name, although I quickly realized I was a big Eagles fan. And I remember when I moved to town, I'm thinking, Jim Ed Norman, where do I know that? And I finally looked it up. So let's go back. Let's do it. You're from Florida, is that right?
Yes.
What town in Florida?
Well, I was born in Fort Myers.
Okay.
My father was a minister, a Methodist minister.
Okay.
And Methodists move the minister from town to town. So I just have to say Florida.
Got you.
There are unique things that happened in each one of those places.
Right.
I was telling someone the other day that and it was a group of students, the kinds of things that you'll find yourself doing even when you have a fascination for music, and even when you're in music in school studying music. I had a summer job packing tomatoes in a town called Bradenton, Florida, which is the West Coast. And that day the foreman came and said, "Hey, you got a fellow on the phone here for you that said you worked for him last year." And I said, okay, well, it's okay if I leave the line here. It was one of those I Love Lucy moments, I think, where, everything is coming down the line and you're getting ready to spill everything. And he said, no, get on the phone. And it turned out it was a call from Kennedy Space Center, and where I had worked the year before. And he said, and simple as this, we're going to the moon this summer, son. You don't want to miss this. You need to get over here. We're able to hire one person of the group that was there, and we all talked about it and decided it was you. You kept us all entertained. The other fellows had been engineers and engineering students, and so I encourage young people that are interested in music and doing something creatively and in the arts, hey, don't overlook packing tomatoes. You never know what call you'll get.
That's crazy. What? Okay.
It was there in 1969 when we
Yeah.
went to
Oh.
Apollo 11.
Oh, I know. I built the models from the kits.
Oh.
I was fascinated. I'm a complete space nerd. I love. We could probably talk the whole hour about that. But
yes.
how did you? So you went from. And my grandmother worked for Methodist Church her whole life.
Oh.
So she worked for the big Methodist Church in Dallas.
Yeah, that is a big one.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Along with SMU.
Yes, which is where I went to school.
Really?
Yes.
That's a great school. Great
is.
reputation.
I would not have been able to afford that school, but I got a music scholarship.
What was your instrument, or what were you doing?
Well, I played low brass, so tuba, trombone, euphonium.
That's fantastic. Well, you're in good company. You know, you got some great trombone players that went on to other things in the music industry. I think Hungate,
Yep.
trombone player, and that's where I met David. I left Florida and went to North Texas
That's
State.
where I was headed with
Oh,
this.
okay,
So
yeah.
you went to North Texas State, which is when I was more known as a jazz school, 1
Yes.
o'clock lab band.
That's right.
Were you a jazz player?
I did. I left the junior college I was in Florida, and Cocoa,
Right.
Brevard Junior College, specifically to go to North Texas because of the big band program. I was playing trombone. I also
Wow.
played euphonium. You start off, and I think they called it in high school baritone, and
Right.
what they did would be to convert us trumpet players,
That's what I was too.
and you played baritone,
Yep.
and you couldn't call yourself a euphonium player until you actually played in the bass clef. So I had moved from euphonium then over to trombone and really loved it.
Which is a whole different deal.
Yes.
So North Texas State, so it's the premier jazz program in the country.
I'm playing,
And you're in it.
and I'm not good enough to play in the 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I was in the 3 o'clock band. My experience with instruments, starting as a young child, was to learn everything a little bit. I really had a hard time sticking with things. And so I moved from piano. I started on trumpet because my dad had played trumpet, and that was what was available, was trumpet. So
Sure.
I started there, then started taking piano lessons. When folk music came along, I got a guitar and learned guitar. When the Beatles came along, it became electric guitar, and just
Yep.
sort of moved through. And on the pedagogical side there, the school learning side, was going through, as you say, the brass instruments. And trombone ended up being really my favorite. But because I had not played trombone all my life, I was competing with Tom Malone and
Yeah.
Steve Turry, and I mean all these guys that were just extraordinary players. But I enjoyed it. I learned more about big band arranging, horns in general, and what have you. But while at North Texas, in the apartment complex where I lived, it was probably a day not unlike today, a beautiful spring day. People had their doors open, probably nearing the end of school, and an excitement and what have you. And the apartment doors were open. Some people had grills out on the sidewalk and were cooking. And as I recall, there was probably a little beer drinking too. Yeah.
Sure.
But I heard music coming out of one of the apartments, and as he tells the story, it was his Led Zeppelin record he was playing. And I walked in and said, "Hey, you ought to check this out." Introduced myself and said, "You ought to check this out." And I gave him a Dillard's album, the progressive bluegrass group.
Okay.
And that was Don Henley.
Right.
Don and I then became friends, listening to music, exposing each other to different kinds of music. And he had a band already in place that had been there since junior high with a group of guys. And I had gone back to Florida to work in the tomato plant. And but when I went back to North Texas the fall that next year, Don called and said that there had been an unfortunate accident. The keyboard player in the band had been killed on a motorcycle. And so he then said, you have a similar taste and interest in music. I'd help him load the van. And so I got to know the guys. But I dropped out of school and moved to Linden to get in the band. At the time, the band was named Felicity. And we continued the tradition of playing clubs in Dallas and frat parties, UT. And at the same time, quickly thereafter, added a fellow named Al Perkins, who played steel guitar, dobro, and guitar, because we began to move towards this new, I think the reference was country rock.
I just wrote that down. Country rock.
Country rock. That's right. And the steel guitar was the final imprimatur and marker, right? You know that you were in country rock when you had a steel guitar.
So we got to stop here because okay. I got to dig in here. Wait a minute. So was it Don's idea to bring in a steel? Did you guys just love country music? Because that is sort of further down, I know we're getting into banjo came in, like on the first Eagles proper record.
That's right. Yes.
Bernie
Ledden. Yeah.
Yep. So was it both of y'all's just love for country? How did the steel get in there?
It was love of country. Don growing up in Texas.
Right.
And my name in the industry is Jim Ed Norman. My given name is Edward James Norman III, a very proper New England name, don't you know? And while at school, it was always, if they were taking attendance in the beginning, it was Edward Norman, and I would just raise, I'd never been known as Edward or Ed. My father was Ed. I'd always been Jim. And turns out, sitting right next to me in the trombone section is another Edward. And finally one day, the upright bass player, the salty old Navy guy, had all he could stand. He says, okay, enough of this. We're going to call you Jim Ed, because it's the inversion of your name. But we're going to call you Jim Ed after Jim Ed Brown.
Jim Ed Brown, right.
Because you like country music. And
okay.
so what you had at North Texas was this dynamic, really, with jazz being the highest of the high art forms.
Yeah.
And country, the lowest of the low.
Stepchild.
Yeah. And because I liked country music and listened to it, then that's how I got the name Jim Ed. I wore it proudly rather than trying to run from it. But I got introduced then from everyone that knew me at North Texas as Jim Ed everywhere I went. And after a while, that's what it was.
It stuck.
But Don, growing up in Texas, the rest, the guys in the band at the time were all Texans. And the combination of taking great classic country songs, but then building these great arrangements with orchestra and horns around them, right up my alley. And so I got pulled down into the world of country music early on, and a love for and of it. And so I think it was just sort of this natural progression where it was, we're moving towards this sound of country infused in what's going on prior to my getting in the band had been a band that played frat parties, and you played a lot of frat party music, Creedence and soul music and Beatles. You played those songs to entertain. And then as the effort was undertaken to develop a sound and a style, the steel came in, or just the natural country intent again, and consciousness. Even the songs, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young had come along, and the harmonies and the structure of what was going on there. I remember how we drive down the highway going to a gig or listening to the radio, and even Ray Price come on with For the Good Times. And for me, with the orchestra and what was going on, my heart would melt. But everybody we loved listening. Behind Closed Doors, Pigs, piano lick. Everything about it was just so electrifying that we found ourselves, I think, sucked into the vortex real quickly.
Well, here's an what I'm thinking about. So you're at the genesis of this, one of the biggest, most successful rock, whatever the Eagles, they kind of have their own category, really. But what's interesting is 20 years later, what you guys did as the Eagles influenced modern country music.
Yeah, that's
in a big way.
Yeah.
So it's sort of odd that you were being influenced by classic country. You do this huge body of work that's rock, pop. No, it's rock. I don't know what that was, but then it goes on to completely influence modern country music. Song structure, everything.
Yes.
Everything. I mean, up until probably 8 years ago, when hip hop started to creep into country as far as the beats, the groove styles. Before that, all modern country was based on Eagles-y stuff.
Well, they wrote great songs.
They did
no
write
matter
great
what
songs.
Category or classification you want to give it.
That's right.
They were great songs.
Yep.
Just fantastic. And if there's a contribution to country music and a continuation of influence, it was that no matter what you're doing, no matter what form you're using to frame the music in, if you write great songs, then you are continuing that great tradition of songs that really sprung, in many cases, from the country. And
Right.
that focus of three chords and the truth. The focus was on what you were saying and the painting of the images and the stories. And they were relentless in that pursuit of. I still had a image in my mind of Don when doing the vocal on Desperado. Still working on some notes on his yellow legal pad with the lyric. But I hope I can find it. I had a version of that because they had rehearsed before going to London to record this record. They'd rehearsed and started working up new songs. And it was around this time that the TIAC 4-channel tape recorder came out.
Yep.
And so in rehearsals, they would frequently then record. And I ended up with a demo that had something I don't remember because it's been a long, long time now since I heard it. But it was, Desperado, come down from the senses, where
he was still working it out.
He is still working it out, and you'd hear a lyric every now and then that would come in that was retained, and then other times where it was just humming, but the framework was there of what this song was going to be, and it's what I began to even listen to as far as its harmonic structure,
Right.
And
because you did the string arrangement,
the orchestral
which is
arrangement.
one of the most iconic country, probably the most iconic country rock string treatment ever done in that genre.
Well, you are kind to say.
No,
so.
No, I think it is. For me personally, I'll put it that way. That particular record, it's unbelievable. Let me ask you this. When you were, talk to us about that. When you were working on that, did you have a sense of where that song would actually find itself in the history of rock and roll?
Absolutely not.
Okay, great. We love that. Go ahead, tell us.
Desperado was the very first thing I ever did in my life, orchestrally. I had done a string quartet. The group that I was in with Don, we changed our name to Shiloh, and we made an album. Kenny Rogers was our producer. I wrote for the album a steel guitar instrumental, and Al plays the steel guitar, and I talked Kenny into letting me do a string quartet just because I was imagining that already, that kind of enveloping of what was happening musically with orchestral texturing. I got to do that. So I had done a string quartet. So the next thing that I did was Desperado, and it came about because Don and Glenn fought for me, because Glenn Johns didn't want some yokel, especially one, I guess, named Jim Ed,
Right.
And I don't blame him. Subsequently
He didn't
becoming
know,
a producer,
you didn't have the resume.
I didn't have a resume at all.
Okay.
So the guys sent me the track that they had recorded, and I probably did not take pencil to paper for 2 weeks or more. All I did was listen to the song, and it was largely there. I mean, by this point, it was really shaped in what it was going to be. And it was, for me, it was Stephen Foster-esque in its nature. It also had some other interesting connections for me as far as even melodically. But I listened and absorbed what was being said, and then just imagined. I would dream it at night even. I would put myself even at times in sleep. I'd be singing that song, thinking that song, and I would find myself that in that in-between state, imagining what it is. So there, the lyric, "There's a rainbow above you," getting the strings soaring above. I did something also unique in that I had no violas on the session. I had only violins, cellos, and upright basses. The day that I was to do the session, I think I had 36 players out there in the orchestra.
In London?
In London,
Okay.
at Olympic Studios.
Okay.
Over in London, the contractor of the session, it was called the Fixer. But I stood right by the doorway because they had to pass through the record room, the control room, to get out to the record room. And so I stood right by the doorway, and he stood next to me, and he said, "Jim Ed, well, this is," and he introduced me, give me their name. "Oh, you might be interested to know, he played on Yesterday." The next one, the so-and-so. And there was a parade of people. "Oh, he plays with the Queen's Chamber Orchestra. Oh, he's in the London Symphony Orchestra," and this stuff went on. By the time I got out in the studio, I was a nervous wreck as far as what was going on.
These guys were heavy hitters.
These are big name guys. They were great players. I then go out into the record room. The chairs set up. No headphones. Now, every session that I'd seen domestically or in the States, the string players all had headphones on. They were everybody listening to the same thing.
Or they had those one-eared. But
So
something.
They had something where they were able to hear what was going on in the track, as well as the conductor that they would then get cues from. So I went back in and told Glenn Johns, the producer-engineer, and said, "Glenn, I noticed there's no headphones out there." "Well, you're going to conduct, aren't you, mate?" and I said, "Well, I guess I am." And so in that moment, I did my first arrangement and became the arranger, the composer, arranger, conductor, all in one fell swoop in that moment.
Wow.
And the record, when it came out, was not a great success. They had already had 3 successful chart records with Witchy Woman, Peaceful, Take It Easy. And when Desperado came out, I think some of the comments even from the record company, "Oh gosh, they've gone and done a cowboy record." And it subsequently, as we know, did extraordinarily well, and the kind of impact that it ultimately had. Linda Ronstadt heard Desperado and then decided she would like to record it, and I ended up doing the strings and horns on her record as well. But Desperado is the most wonderful experience for me of late, certainly, because it's the very first thing that I ever did, and it's the last thing that I hear as a part of the encore each concert that the Eagles do. And my entire life as an arranger, subsequently then even getting to be a producer, grew out really of that moment, because as that record came, there were a group of people who, when hearing the music and then reading the credits, it became, well, Jim Ed, I didn't know you were an arranger. And so some people truly didn't. Others, I'd been knocking on their doors, saying, hey, I'm an arranger and would like the opportunity to. And then that stamp of approval, being associated with the guys, it got this and the next. And I actually got my first job as a producer. I got recommended, had not really done any producing, but got recommended by some fellas that I were doing arranging for in New York, Hank Medras and Dave Apple. Hank had been in the Tokens, A Lion Sleeps Tonight, but they were producing Tony, Orlando, and Don.
Okay.
And they had a group that they'd signed, and they had seen my name associated with Eagles, and so they got in touch, and I'd gone to New York. As fate would have it, they got asked to produce someone, and they didn't have time. And they said, hey, there's this kid on the West Coast you ought to talk to that would be interested, told the record company. And so, lo and behold, one day, while at work once again, I was no longer packing tomatoes, but I got a call at work from Clive Davis.
Wow. Where were you working?
I was working at Sunbury Dunbar, which was RCA's publishing company.
Adjacent to what you wanted to do, but you weren't exactly doing what you wanted to do.
That's right.
So Clive Davis calls.
Clive Davis calls.
Who's the man? He's the absolute man at that point,
absolutely.
Right? Okay.
And he ends up saying, I don't know a lot about you, other than that you worked with the Eagles here and that you'd like to produce. And I go, yeah, well, I definitely would love to produce. Now, the thing I've had the opportunity to do is to be around someone like Don Henley, who takes songwriting seriously. He was an English major there in North Texas and well-read. I was now working in a publishing company, and I got to hear songs and writing and be around the craft of writing and get a sense of what it was about. I got a chance to be exposed. I got a chance to pitch songs. I then had the job of listening to writers from the street and got to listen to writers. Jim Ed, you go meet with this person. So I got exposed to and began to listen to songs in a completely different way. I don't know when it was for you that a transition happened, but if you grow up as an instrumentalist, playing low brass and all these other things, you really focused more on harmonic progressions, melodies, and what have you. And at times, records, we felt confident that there were records that were hits and very successful, that people had no idea what the lyric was. What was going on.
I was exactly the same kind of guy, and I got my butt kicked when I moved here. That's when it happened. And within a couple months working with some people that I got to work with, I realized, all right, it's all lyrics.
Yes.
It's not a sonic town. It's a lyric town.
Yes.
So I had to go back. Yes, there was a moment where I realized I'm back to the grindstone. I know it. And it took me 2 or 3 years.
Well, it took me longer than that to even understand, the impact of the craft and the nature of the craft and how necessary it was to understand the craft to really come up with something that was going to be extraordinary and special. But being around it now, not only from the early being in the publishing company, but having the luxury of being around writers like Don and Glenn and Jackson, JD, and all those people, to be able to hear the quality and the attention and focus and detail that when Clive called and said, well, I don't know much about, can you meet me at the hotel and let's discuss this? So I went over there and said, well, because I don't know, I want to play you some songs. I don't want you to tell me what you think of them. And
wow,
nerve-wracking experience. Once again. So I sit down and I listen, and he plays a song, and I go, I don't really have a good feel for that. He said, well, I think that's a hit. I'm going to do that with Melissa Manchester. Oh, okay. Play another one. No, I don't hear that. So I think that's a hit. I'm going to do it with Barry Manilow. And this went on for a bit.
Wow.
Where I'm going, oh,
Wow.
man, the
Wow.
master is playing me songs,
Yeah.
and I'm not getting it.
And he thinks they're hits.
Yes. He plays a song, and I go, if you're going to give me a chance to produce a record for you, let it be with that song right there. I feel it. I understand it. I know what to do. I really feel strongly I know what to do. And he said, okay, I don't know for sure who it is I want to pitch to you artist-wise then. Can you come see me tomorrow? Yes, I think I can work that out. And I see him the next day, and he plays me a young lady who has recorded an album already, and says, do you think she could record the song that you like? And I go, yes, I can hear the record in my head of what to do. I think she can. He played me a song from the album that she had done and said, what do you think of this song? And I said, I like the song, but I don't think it's been arranged properly, that it could really be done differently. He said, I was thinking the same thing. So would you do these two songs? Yes. So the very first producing job that I got was working with Jennifer Warnes, and the first song that I produced was Right Time of the Night.
Wow. And that's the one you heard that you told Clive
That's
Davis.
the one that
so you had a good ear there.
I said, yes. Well, because the song that Clive had asked if I could do, along with the one that I'd chosen, Right Time of the Night, the other one was called I'm Dreaming, they were really not similar at all. And so I got a group of musicians that I thought could walk both worlds. Great players. They were all in Neil Diamond's band. So I get these king players, great players, cut the two tracks. I take them home. I get a rough made, and I take them home, and I listen to them that night. And the song Clive has chosen sounds pretty good. Mm-hmm. And Right Time of the Night was horrible.
Really?
Yeah. It no feel, no nothing. It just stunk. And so I had it was a seminal moment for me in how I was going to address now this, circumstance. The next day, the head A&R from Arista called to say, hey, Jim Ed, how did the session go? And I said, it went great. I've got to cut Right Time of the Night again. And he said, there was a little silence where he said, what's wrong? And I said, nothing wrong. I got to cut it again. And he said, well, how's your budget? And I said, the budget's fine. I got it under control. Now, what I'd been able to do, being an arranger and a fan of great arrangers, in the budget for those songs, I'd put in that I was going to hire one of my idols, a fellow named Nick DeCaro. Nick had written all those beautiful arrangements on the Gordon Lightfoot records, like If You Could Read My Mind. I mean, the list went on and on and on and on. And I was going to work with Nick. Well, there went my Nick DeCaro budget when I had to recut again. So I ended up getting a whole new set of players, a new engineer, a new studio, a new everything, essentially is what it was. And went in and cut. As a matter of fact, I had Matt Betton on drums, who was from North Texas.
Wow.
He had played in the 1 O'Clock band with David, Tom Malone, all the guys that went to Saturday Night Live band were all from the 1 O'Clock band. The Blues Brothers, they're also affectionately known as, the band that was with them. And cut Right Time of the Night, was happy with it. Did overdubs, got everything together. The big day comes. Clive flies back out to Los Angeles, and can I come over and play him what I got? So I come over and play him what I got. And he says, you did good, kid. It's obvious that I'm Dreaming is a smash. Now, I'm crestfallen, heartbroken.
Because you okay, all right. You did not agree with that.
Well, it was I couldn't not agree with it because it's the master.
Sure.
I mean, the guy, he
Yeah.
didn't get called Clive Davis for nothing.
No.
He earned that name.
No, and you got to be careful.
The experience was just cool your jets and listen and learn what you can learn from this. And so I stood down, and as fate would have it, the publisher of Right Time of the Night called Clive and said, Clive, you've had this song on hold for 6 months. Imagine that now. So people have songs on hold for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Waiting
Wow.
for so-and-so to have their album come out. But you've had the song on hold for 6 months, which back in 76 or 77 was an eternity. And if you don't release it, then John Travolta has heard it and wants to record it. John was on the hit television show Welcome Back, Kotter, I think
Right.
it was. And was also now making a record. He was a teen heartthrob.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Was this pre-Grease?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And that he'd heard it and wanted to record it. And so somewhat under duress, the song gets given to the promotion department at Arista, and they go, well, we think we could do something with this, Clive. And so they released it, and I don't know, it was 8 weeks later. It was, soaring up the charts, and it ended up selling a million copies, made it into the top 10 of the pop charts, and then crossed into country.
Wow.
Most of the time it was
Yeah, that's
right. You start in
backwards.
country, backwards. You start in country and then you cross this way. Well, it was a hit in pop charts and then moved into country. But that experience I talk about because of it was sticking to your guns when you have a feeling about something. But there's also I think out of it I developed something that I also share with people who are struggling at times when it comes to how to break through. And I say, patient, positive persistence. I co-opted that from, in school we learned the 3 Bs, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms.
Right.
And then I changed it to Bach, Bacharach, and the Beatles. And eventually it was the 5 Bs. It was Bach, Bacharach, the Beatles, and Bobby Bear. And but the 3 Ps then became patient, positive, persistence, and you got to have all of them. You can't, if you're patient and you're positive, but you're not persistent, it won't work.
Yep.
If you're persistent and you're patient, but you're a jerk and not positive about what it is that's going
true.
on, it won't work either. So I said it requires these, I think, 3 elements then, and as you keep pressing through. But I also have a great story about how in producing and talking with young producers, the feel of something outruns tuning and all the other stuff, unless something's just maybe horrific. When I wrote, now because I had to write the string chart on both I'm Dreamin' and Right Time of the Night. And as I write the chart, I write it by just from memory.
Really?
And I get into the studio the day we're in the studio to record. The studio breaks. Nothing's working. The board's not working. Not talking
Gotcha.
to the tape machines and all this kind
You
of
couldn't
thing.
record.
Couldn't record. So the string players, and that's one of those classic, deals where the clock is out there, and when that clock strikes 1 o'clock, they got a 10-to-1 session.
Sure.
And they got a movie date down in Hollywood at 2. So at 1 o'clock, they're going to bolt, right? They're out the door. We're over in Burbank, and they're going to have to go down to Hollywood. The studio stays down for 2.5 hours,
Oh, my God.
and I now have a half an hour to get 2 songs done.
Oh.
I spend 20 minutes working on the one Clive chose. I just know that's the, well, it also,
Well, that's
it was
the one he
a-
loves,
it
and
was-
you're trying to get a gig.
Yes. And the sight read, Right Time of the Night.
Wow.
Clock
Wha-
strikes 1 and they're gone.
One take.
1 take. I walk into the control room and plop down in the chair, just a complete mess. You imagine this being your first record.
No, it's crazy. Crazy.
And because Right Time of the Night is still up, because it was the last thing we did, I finally just recover enough, and I tell the engineer, I said, well, hit play. Let me hear how that went. In the second verse, right away, there's this rub, and I go, roll back. What is that? I had written, from memory, I'd written the cello parts to go with the bass from the original session that I had done before recutting it. And it was where the bass was pushing, it was like a dotted quarter tied to an eighth, and it would push. Where the subsequent recording, I didn't want that anymore. I turned into the more Beatle, the boom, boom, boom kind of thing.
Right.
Then I had a modulation in the song, and as it marched up from a 4/5 to a 4♯/5♯, to modulate, I hear screech, 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 screech from the violins. What in the world is that? Turns out, as I'd written the violin parts in the new key already, so they're a half step off.
Oh, so they were sight reading.
They were sight reading, so they just played what was there.
They actually did it correct from their point of view.
They did it correctly.
Wow.
And so I was, oh my goodness, what am I going to do here? And so in mixing, just turned down the cello rub that's there. On the screech, 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 I got an electric guitar and put down, down, down like that over there, loud electric guitar. And to some extent, there was a tension that was created in that walk up that then as it resolves, and as I've told that story from time to time with friends in the studio, if we get to telling stories and I talk about the beginning, I've had people come back and say, I heard Right Time of the Night on the radio the other day, and I heard one little remaining that happens in that walk up.
Right.
Right.
Well,
time.
what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention.
That's right.
How many happy accidents have you been of all the I mean, I know you thousands, right? For the records you've made, things that you didn't plan on, or
oh gosh, yes. And the smartest thing I've learned is to have a basic framework and don't plan on anything, because you never know what it is that's going to happen. I've gotten to a point, or I did get to a point where I knew I can write everything out and just have people play what it is that I've written. There's an efficiency with respect to all of a sudden being able to get 3. Maybe even 4 songs done in a session, right? Just fly through with. You got great players, they just play what's written. I learned early on, you miss so much by doing that. And it made more sense to get fewer songs in a session and let the cosmos participate with you in some fashion, and what all of these other amazing musicians were going to bring.
Right, because they bring so much. And then at the same time, sometimes you have to crack the whip because it gets out of control.
That's right.
And then of course the orchestral, the string people, any of the people that read, they don't really. I mean, I've seen some cello guys, solo cello guy could come in and improvise.
Yes.
But in general, they don't.
They don't.
They just.
That's right.
And then, like you said, they're out the door at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
They're a whole different set, man.
They are a whole different breed.
They are a different breed. They are not like the Nashville Cats. You know what I mean?
Don tells a story about during Desperado when we were recording that, and he does a British accent. He said, the guys are talking. He said, they don't care at all about what it is they're doing here. They don't know what they're doing. And it was funny. I don't feel like a desperado.
Don't go away. Pitch List will be right back after the break. This episode of Pitch List is brought to you by Screened Threads. Telling a story is what Screened Threads does every day. Screened Threads is a family-owned business specializing in Nashville curated gifts. Thoughtfully crafted and simple designs set Screened Threads apart. Check them out online at screenedthreads.com or visit them in person at Marathon Village, located at 1200 Clinton Street, Suite 38 in Nashville. To get 10% off your purchase, use the promo code PitchList online at screenedthreads.com or in person at their store by mentioning Pitch List Podcast when you check out. Let me ask you this. You said something before, and I want to come back. You said you had a story about Hotel California.
Oh.
Which is another, I'm not going to say it's the Eagles' best record, but it's probably one of the moments for the Eagles, I think. That's
absolutely
the big,
yes.
It sort of defines them or what they became, what you guys were moving toward. Tell us this. You said you might have a story
I think
about
what it was is, again, it had to do with the nature of what this business is and how we all work together and how we participate and what it means to be a part of that entire process. And I get to use this one particular thing in, again, when talking with anyone about always do more than you're asked to do. And the example that I'm able to use currently because of Hotel California is that there was a song on the record called Wasted Time that I was so moved by
Yes.
that I wrote an orchestral piece that is now known as the Wasted Time Reprise.
Yep.
But I wasn't asked to do that. I just was so moved by the song and the melody, so that I wrote this piece. Again, the fates intervening. There was enough time left over, as opposed to the clock running out. In this case, it was about a half hour left over. And I said, hey, guys, I wrote something. Would you be interested in hearing it? And they said, sure, we'd love to hear what you got. And so once again, I think we did one run through and recorded it, and then they were out the door. But it ended up, because the record, when it originally came, was on vinyl. And so you had side one and side two. And so side two opened with the reprise before the side two.
I listened to it, I don't even know, 500 times, I bet. I just wore that record out. I've had it as a record. I've had it as a CD. That's one of my favorites.
Well, and I, as I said, I get to use that as an example of, well, you never know.
Right.
Because you'd asked a minute ago, did you know how Desperado would fare in the pantheon of great music and great songs and great musical contributions to the world? You know, really, if music is America's contribution to world culture in so many ways, no, didn't know it when the reprise got written but it was being moved creatively, going with opportunity, going with the moment.
Yes.
And you just work through it, and it happens. If you're fortunate, it happens.
Right. Well, let me ask, I want to backtrack a little bit. You've worked with so many iconic songwriters. Jackson Browne, you mentioned J.D. Souther, obviously Don Henley, Glenn Frey. And actually, I was going through, again, I can't name them all, but a lot of incredible writers and a lot of country writers. But, you know, these guys, I mean, I'm getting the feeling from you that Henley and Frey especially were, you know, really worked on these songs. I mean, they were like serious craftsmen, right?
Yes,
and
right.
It was like it seems like they realized, and you realized, that everyone realized that that's what's going to make this work, right?
That's right.
These songwriters you've been around, talk to us about that, things that you've seen, things they might have in common, things that they might not have in common. Can you?
Well, clearly in common is the recognition that lyric and what it is that's being said is crucial.
Yeah.
You can begin to have some divergence after that with the role that music plays. The other thing to be able to mention here is Desperado was the first song that Don and Glenn co-wrote.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And Glenn, by his nature, from Detroit,
right,
was a more R&B, soul, rock oriented. Don had rock in there infused along with his country.
Gotcha.
But they both realized the value of lyric and what went on, and at times who was going to take the ball and run with it when it came to that. And they would have germs of ideas and lyric. So you had first the attention to that. Then on One of These Nights album, they'd been trying to record the song in the key of C all day long, and Randy Meisner ended up then saying, hey, I'm having a hard time singing this in the studio as we sing it, much less night after night after night in the key of C. We've got to lower this a half step. And playing piano, you know that you go from C, no sharps or flats.
No transpose buttons on a real piano.
That's right. And going to the key of B, now you got 5 sharps and black notes.
It's a bear key right there.
I was the utility person that got called from time to time.
Gotcha.
And I got a call from the publishing company, and it was Glenn saying, can you come down and play? And I said, what's the matter? He said, I can't play in B.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would go down and play, and I played then on Take It to the Limit that day and Lion Eyes. I say that
Wow.
day, that night. So I got to see various stages of their growth, development, but the relentless attention to detail was something that both Don and Glenn shared. No matter what might then diverge as far as the internal emotional motivation, harmonically and melodically, and feel, as far as what the feel and style was going to be. The similarity, to some extent, if you will, between even Desperado and its Stephen Foster-esque nature and style, but also with Ray Charles.
Yeah.
Glenn would be the one that would be bringing that consciousness at times to the music. At one point, when working at the publishing company, I'd saved my money for 7 months, and I bought a plane ticket to go see some guys that were making records, because I'd been driving down the 101 freeway there in Los Angeles, headed to work one day, and I heard this record. It was the most astounding sounds that I'd ever heard coming from the record at the time. It was a song called If You Don't Know Me By Now, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes.
Yeah, I know that record.
And I had to find out, go meet the people who made this record. So I saved my money for 7 months, and I bought a plane ticket to Philadelphia. And I had enough money for 2 nights at the Holiday Inn downtown Philadelphia. And, of course, you're flying against the sun when you go east. So I got there, and it was in the afternoon, late afternoon. And essentially was able to walk to where I could find their offices, so I knew where I was going the next morning and spent the night. Got up the next morning and I went down there to the office, waiting room, reception room, and I said, hey, is there any chance I can see, and this one, I got long hair and a beard, and
Right.
any chance I can speak with Gamble and Huff? And she said, well, they're not here. I said, oh, well, I know she got a waiting room. You suppose I could wait there until they come in? And she said, I don't think that'd be a good idea. And I went, oh, well, is there any chance they'll be in later today? Because I'm sitting there going,
Yeah, you flew across the country.
All across the country to meet these guys. And what an idiot. So I go stand out in the hallway, just going, what am I going to do? This is big. I can't not meet these guys. And I hear music at the end of the hallway. This was an old office building, wooden doors, frosted glass, windows with, gold embossed names and door numbers. But I hear music coming down at the end of the hall, and I can hear somebody playing changes on the piano, and I go, that somebody has something to do with this music I've been listening to, because I now know the OJs backwards and forwards. I know the Spinners, the list went on, and Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. So I worked my way down there, because I noticed there's restrooms out there, and I said, well, everybody's going to have to go to the restroom sooner or later, so I'll just wait. And sure enough, all of a sudden, after a while, it was probably only 45 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. Stops. I hear footsteps, and sure enough, that door that has nothing on it, just the back door, opens up. And poor guy, scare him to death, because I'm standing there, he jumps back, goes, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, Mr. Bell, I'm so sorry. It was Tom Bell, who had been the arranger producer on all those Spinners records, and I recognized him. And I said, Mr. Bell, my name is Jim Ed Norman, I'm an arranger. I saved my money for 7 months. I flew all the way here to meet you guys. And he goes, what? Mr. Bell, my name is Jim Ed Norman, and I saved my money for 7 months. I kept getting that in there, thinking maybe he'd take pity on me. and I wanted to, and I know all your music. I know all your records, backwards and forwards and that kind of. And I think his adrenaline was going because I scared him. And he finally came and he said, okay, you're an arranger. Have you done anything? And I said, well, I've only done one thing. You wouldn't know it. It's a country rock band in Los Angeles. And he said, really, what is it? And I said, it's a group called the Eagles. And he went, one of those kind of looks that you can get like, yeah, right. You did the arranging on Desperado? I said, yes, sir. What's your name again? And I said, I can show you my license here. Unfortunately, it says Edward James Norman, but my Jim Ed Norman. Said, you wait right here. He went inside, came back out, and said, that Jim Ed Norman right there, that's you. He had Desperado.
Oh, he had it.
He had the album.
Wow.
And so he said, what's up? What are you doing? I said, I just, we're all, and in particular, Glenn, fans of what it is that's going on here, and the records that are being made are just spectacular. And as the music from the band matured, you can hear some of those influences even, and not only Detroit, but what was going on in Philadelphia, along with the continued infusion of what was going on in country and that kind of thing.
That totally makes sense. Did you feel like, so you wanted to meet him, you wanted to go there and see how are they doing this, right?
Yes. Take It to the Limit comes, and what made me think of this is because we were talking about Take It to the Limit, and now I'm playing piano on it, and unless you got perfect pitch, well, I'm hoping you couldn't tell the difference between the intro of If You Don't Know Me By Now and Take It to the Limit. They both go, boom, boom, down.
Oh, wow, they do. Yeah. Wow.
And the string arrangement that I did was an homage in total respect for what it is that was going on there. So it wasn't that it was talked about and built purposefully in conjunction and in teamwork, but rather happened on the natch. It was just by osmosis, if you will. Yeah.
Right. Your career, it's like we could just talk forever. We could talk forever. But I am curious about what prompted your move to Nashville.
I had gotten started with producing with Right Time of the Night, and because of the success of Right Time of the Night, because of my connection with the Eagles and then Irving around all of that.
Irving Azoff,
sorry.
Yep.
When Urban Cowboy came along, there was a consideration that, well, maybe Jim Ed could produce some of this stuff for Urban Cowboy.
Sure.
And the first person that then got thrown out there for me to work with was Mickey Gilley, who we just lost. Wonderful man. He didn't want to work with me.
Just briefly, what was his problem? Rock guy?
Well,
not a country guy?
Yeah, I was not a country guy.
Okay.
He thought of me as a guy who did ballads with Anne Murray. Had produced Anne Murray by this point.
Yeah, and you guys had, a string of massive hits.
Yes.
Massive.
Yes. But I finally, there was a decision that I would do at least one side with Gilley, or do two sides, could do a session.
Right.
And the decision was to come here and do it in Nashville, because that's where he operated from when it came to recording. So I came to Nashville. I had never recorded here before. Mm-hmm. I was proposing that we do the Benny King song, Stand By Me. And the success then of Stand By Me and working with Mickey, and another song I recorded with him, an old Buddy Holly song, True Love Ways, were number one on the charts 3 weeks apart. We're in the top 5 at the same time. And that had not previously happened in country music, where songs followed number one that quickly at that time, nor have 2 songs in the top 5. And I tell you, as far as Gilly not wanting to work with me, and the reason I tell this story at all is because he would tell it on himself constantly. He still had some reserve about working with me. And we went into the studio. Now, Mickey was used to recording 4 songs in 3 hours, or at least 3 songs in 3 hours. And we had 2 sessions booked that day, a 10 and a 2. Wasn't working. It just wasn't feeling right. So I started working on the arrangement, changing things around as you do when it's not working, not feeling right. We then broke at 1 o'clock for lunch. I took the musicians to lunch because I wanted to just get to know them more and visit and spend some time with them. And Mickey went over to the, as I recall, as he tells the story, the Hall of Fame lounge that was a hotel, a Best Western hotel, I think. And he proceeded to tell everybody about this idiot that he was working with from Los Angeles. He said, we've been over there all day long. We've been in there for 3. We still haven't recorded anything. I've never seen anything like it. It was just crazy. And we come back and start back up at 2 o'clock. I've moved the acoustic piano to electric piano and beginning to move things around as far as parts. And along with it, Mickey, who has been singing this song over and over and over and just fit to be tied about the whole experience, is finally leaning against the wall and singing "When the Night Has Come," where prior to that he'd been, almost Jerry Lee sideways,
right,
is what he was doing, because that's what he had been known for in many cases, that ring on the piano and that kind of thing. And so this had started to decompress. And we wound up at, I think it was at 4 o'clock, and he made a beeline out of that studio. I said, hey, I got to have you back here tomorrow, okay? And he said, what? And I said, 10 o'clock tomorrow. I got here, okay. And the next day he comes in and sings, and knowing that at any moment he's going to bolt. He has just had it. And so he sings, and I then was, okay, do another one. He didn't realize I was just loading vocals up, knowing that he was going to bolt, and I was going to comp. And he'd never been around the comping process as far as what was going on with the vocals. Sometimes you might have a line that was more in tune,
right,
but it didn't feel good.
Right.
I always went with feel. So there are times when there were things that wouldn't be perfectly in tune, and I didn't care.
Was he unfamiliar with the technique?
Yeah.
So he's used to cutting a whole vocal.
He would do a vocal top to bottom, and somebody say something to him about, well, you need to sing on that song. You're flat on that note or whatever. So,
right.
And I always felt that's easily a distraction for someone singing about, they're preparing for this moment that's going to come up that they have to sing a particular way, rather than just the complete gay abandon of, I'm singing for all the fun. And where comping allows you to then grab performances. And I realize that at times when artists that I've worked with, and they might get a Grammy for best female pop vocal performance, to realize you've worked with them to achieve that vocal performance, because it really is now a performance of not only the multiple tracks, but it's a performance of what it is that's happening in the combination of those tracks that brings out then the emotion that's going on. But at any rate, it was that experience with Gilly led to a long, fruitful relationship. And I went. It was great experience too, because since he had gone to great pains to talk about this idiot he was working with, I became a genius overnight.
Right.
Right.
Well, once you had these giant records,
and in many respects, that's how I came to Nashville.
Gotcha.
So
that opened the door to all the work you were doing.
That's right.
And then you eventually moved here.
That's right.
Now
that was in 1980. And it led to doing multiple Gilly records, Johnny Lee. I was working with Michael Martin Murphy.
Yep.
But all of that led to then, what happened is I started being asked questions by artists that I was working with, like, what do you think of my manager? what do you think of my
Okay.
record company? And it dawned on me, all I could do is make something up because I didn't really know the business. I made records and I turned them into a company who then did what they do.
Right.
And I really didn't know anything about the process. I knew a bit about publishing because I'd worked in a publishing company, so I understood what was going on there. But on the record company side, decided I wanted to get an A&R gig at a record company, learn what a record company did, and then I was going to go back independent as a producer again. And I had done some work for Jimmy Bowen. Bowen actually owned the label on which Shiloh's record came out. Shiloh was on Amos Records, which
Wow.
was Jimmy Bowen's label. So I'd known Bowen. I got in touch with Jimmy and said, would you put in a good word for me with respect to A&R gig at Elektra? He was running Elektra Records here in Nashville. I think within maybe a couple of weeks of that conversation, in putting all of the stuff together, at this point have 2 young girls, babies, 18-month-old and 6-week-old baby girls, and really say, I'm not going to raise them in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And have spent time here. I'm, to some extent, a product of the South.
Right.
Been around it myself.
Yeah. Well, Florida,
And,
Texas,
Yeah.
definitely.
And so that I call Jimmy and say, never mind, thank you so much, I appreciate it, but I've decided I'm just going to move to Nashville. And at this point, I had a production company with offices in L.A. and Nashville,
Okay.
and publishing company. And so I move to Nashville, to which Jimmy says, well, why don't you just come work with me then? If you're going to come to Nashville, come over here and work in A&R. I'm going to retire at some point. I'll teach you the business, and then maybe you'll get a shot at running the company when I retire. I said, well, how long is it going to be to retire? And he said, well, probably 5 years. And I went, I don't know that I'm going to be able to hang in that long. And Jimmy's 5 years he left in 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And so
Did you go work for him?
No.
Yeah.
Mo Austin, who was the head of Warner Brothers Records, the big Warner Records, came down, interviewed people here in town for, as I recall, it was about 10 days, various people. And at the end of that, he said, I know it's maybe on the early side, but if you want the job of running the company, it's yours.
Wow.
He had always had great success with creative people at the helm. Lenny
Yeah.
Waronker, and so he felt comfortable letting a guy with, and he said, you'll have help here. You have people who will know more than you in the beginning.
Right.
Just continue to operate on your instincts and produce and make music and what have you, and was very encouraging. So it was okay. And the rest was geography.
Wow, right. So that's a pretty amazing story. So you were envisioning yourself going to A&R position, learn the ropes. If you liked it, you go up. If not, you have the ability to say, but you just jumped right in to run Warner Brothers Records in Nashville.
But I had great help to me.
Of course,
people,
of course.
A couple of the people who had already been there and were fine with staying as opposed to leaving,
right,
and going to the next thing that Jimmy was going to do. They just stayed, and we took a different direction than what Jimmy had been doing historically.
Mm-hmm.
It was, no, let's go sign the next generation of country music artists.
Right.
And so the A&R people turned loose in many respects. Go find something that's exciting and that you can be passionate about.
Right.
So that we can sign people and be excited about what it is.
And develop them. You guys were developing.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is, unfortunately, you don't see it as much. I remember when I moved here, Tim McGraw had like 5 singles that tanked.
Yeah.
Until Indian Outlaw worked.
That's right.
And that was common. You signed people and you believed in that artist and you were there for the long term, all those things. We don't have that anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then now we're even moving into a different thing where I just don't think we even have the record company anymore. More management, or, everyone's streaming. They're owning a lot more. It's just a completely different
Yes.
business.
It
now.
is, but the business has changed constantly ever since I began to study it back as a kid in the 60s. And look, it was constantly changing in one way or another. And I think this is just a continuation
okay.
of that change. And it's that that I had people at times come to see me at Warner's, and they would say, you've developed a reputation of forthright honesty, and I'm struggling with my record company, and I'm struggling with this. There'd be artists that were not necessarily on the label. And I said, well, tell me what's up. Tell me what's going on. And a lot of times when they tell me what it is they were bothered by and upset by, and I'd say, well, look, I think you really only have two choices. You can either go learn the business you have chosen, or you can go raise a bunch of money and start a nonprofit and see if you can figure out some way to change the business, because what you've just outlined for me is just the way the business operates. And if you spend all your time getting consumed with the fact that it's changed and it's this and that and the other, you'll never be able to realize your dreams. And so most people would go back and learn the business they have chosen.
Well, and it's a great point. It's a great point. It is always changing. It always has. And especially, you see writers that have been around for a while. They start to sort of bitch and moan about stuff. And I'll tell you one thing that's never changed, and I don't think it ever will. If you write a truly great song, something's going to happen.
Yes.
I don't mean like kind of great. I mean, if you write Desperado, something's going to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I believe that. I used to say it because, a lot of people when they move here, they think, well, it's the politics and I can't and all the negative stuff. And I used to say it.
I agree. I think, it is if you want to get together and complain and gripe a bit.
Right.
And well, then still write what it is that's happening, and then write that great one at the same time. Write two that day, or get back together again another time and say, you know what, we're going to write a great song independent of what is going on in the business and what we need to do and how we need to fashion it and make the demo. Do that, but don't overlook that what you said is absolutely true. You really need to just make sure you're writing great songs and forget about all the energy that goes into griping about how much it's changed.
Life is short, man. It's a hard business. It's you just really don't have time for that. You know what I mean? You really don't.
Yes.
It's challenging to get anything done even when people have talent,
That's
so
right.
So you've got to be down there. But I love your 3 Ps. What are they again?
Patient, positive, persistence.
Yeah, and you do need all 3.
All 3. First and foremost, be nice. Just be nice.
Yeah.
Okay? Be nice.
I agree.
And the other would be contrary to what Nancy Reagan said. Of course, a lot of people won't know who Nancy Reagan is, I guess, in this day and time. But just say yes. She had that famous campaign, about drugs. Just say no.
Right.
And I go, just say yes. Not to drugs, but if somebody says, can you, before they finish the sentence, you say yes. And if you don't know how to do what it is they've asked you to do, figure it out between then and the day you have to perform. Because that's called, you just got a shot. Can you? And the way you're going to elicit that most often is by being nice and participating in some fashion, some form or fashion of what's going on.
Well, look at you. When Don Henley asked you to do an arrangement, and very famous producer Glenn Johns is thinking, well, he has no resume. I have no A, B, C, D. This guy, the guys, these are the guys, they've got a buddy. You could have easily thought, I can't do this. They'll never, it's so true. I say it all the time too. The answer is yes. Just say yes and then figure it out.
What happened is after the Desperado session, we went to dinner to sort of celebrate the guys that never done orchestra on a record. That was the first for them as well. And we went to dinner and celebrating and sitting around, and sort of the gravity of the day, if you will, began to creep in on me. And I said, guys, when I think through everything that went on, how in the world did you get Glenn to agree to do this? I mean, and then they said, well, Jim Ed, actually, he didn't think you were going to be able to pull it off, and he had Paul Buckmaster waiting in the wings.
Wow.
Paul Buckmaster had done all the Elton John.
Oh, yeah.
range
Yeah,
of
he
stuff.
was, yeah.
Oh, he was king. He'd done movie soundtracks, all kinds of stuff. And so it was a classic, as you point out there once again, as far as I could have demurred on the front end and just said no, but it's like, no, figure it out, be ready to go, no matter how much you're surrounded by maybe something that's negative. And
It's true. There's an old saying, opportunity knocks, only some people answer the door.
yeah,
You want to answer the door.
that's right.
Well, I could talk to you forever, but I think we're going to have to zip it up.
Understood.
Jim Ed Norman, absolute legend in the music business. I mean, I feel bad that we really didn't even cover. Dude, listen, if y'all listening to this interview, I'm telling you, Google Jim Ed, and just to get an idea of what I'm trying to tell you. I mean, we couldn't even get into it all. So, if you ever want to do it again, we would love to do a part 2. There's just so many artists we didn't even talk about.
Well, I would look forward to it.
Okay.
I really had an enjoyable time visiting with you, Chris. It's wonderful.
Okay, thank you for being on Pitch List, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch List. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or your preferred listening platform. And if you want, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review. For exclusive content from this week's guest and more, you can visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Plus, don't forget to let us know on social media what songwriter, musician, or music business professional you want to hear from next. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.